Okay, so we'll be starting at the wall, and you will want to have a ball, and we'll be using the wall to massage the right shoulder. So we'll start on the right, then we'll pause in between, then I'll let you know when it's time to do the left. A tennis ball works really great. There are even balls that are specifically designed for this. So whatever you want to use is great. And you'll put that ball between you and the wall, and then just start rolling back and forth. So you'll have to get your hair out of the way. Sometimes you might have clothing in the way. You want to stay in the soft tissue, meaning avoiding bone. Like you don't want to be on the bone of the spine or anywhere of the bones around the neck. A little bit of the shoulder blade can be okay, but really what the ball is best for is the tissue, the soft tissue. We'll spend a couple of minutes each side and just go nice and slowly. I know I always, even after all these years, have a tendency to start off a little fast. So you want to go slowly because that way the ball can like encourage hydration in the tissues. Just like if you were to go get a massage from someone, they go nice and slowly. That's part of the benefit is the slow quality. And you can also experiment with different planes of motion. So it might be occasionally up and down, side to side, maybe some diagonals. You can experiment with your arm position, bringing your right arm forward or overhead. I always find some interesting spots on the inner border of the shoulder blade. Remember, this should feel pleasant. It might feel intense. I know for me it does feel intense, some of the spots, but it should feel overall pleasant. Just a few more breaths here. And then in the next breath or two, we'll pause. And it's really useful to come to maybe a mountain pose between your two sides. And for me, the difference in sensation is really, really drastic. It feels like my left shoulder is like 3 inches higher than my right. I feel like I'm two halves of two different people. And so let's do the other side. Same idea. And start off just, with mild pressure. Remembering to go slowly. One of my favorite things about using the wall to do the shoulders is not only can I better sort of control the amount of pressure and the exact movement and placement of the ball, but also it almost has a little bit of like a quality of dancing as we're here. So we have that fluidity in the rest of the body, which is also really nice for releasing tension. And if you haven't already, experiment with a few different planes of movement. Maybe even explore the inner border of the shoulder blade. A few more breaths here. You can experiment with your arm placement as well. Last couple of breaths. And then when you're ready, you can set the ball maybe over toward your mat where you're definitely not going to step on it, but we will use it when we're back on the floor. But for now, maybe mountain pose against the wall, pausing to notice if the two sides feel a little more similar now. I know my left side typically is tighter usually, and it still feels like it's tighter than my right, but it feels a lot better than it did. Okay, so since we're at the wall, we're going to take advantage of that for a ragdoll pose. So your hips are against the wall, but you'll walk your feet like 6 to 18 inches forward. It just depends on your height and your preference. But we'll come into a forward fold. In yin, we call it ragdoll. And your buns are kind of on the wall, so the wall holds your body and supports it a little bit. So you'll ease into it. I highly recommend you start with bent knees and then kind of go from there. Your hands can be on your legs. You can stay in a little bit of a half lift like I am. You could let your hands come down to your shins. You could use blocks for your hands if you wanted to. You could have your hands on the earth. And if possible, the hips just rest on the wall, helping to take a little bit of the load off. Your head can hang if you want to. And now you see where the pose gets its name. We're nice and limp, like a rag doll. Slow, deep breath. About 5 more breaths to go. So I'm just a moment ahead of you, just so I can describe where we're going to go next. We're going to end up on the floor. So sometimes after your head's been below your heart, it can be nice to literally just lower down to the earth rather than standing up. But if your space and arrangement makes more sense to stand first, that's perfectly fine. But for me, sometimes I just like to bring the knees down. And then we'll meet in a brief child's pose. So we won't be in the child's pose too long, but we will stay by the wall because we'll use it for our next few poses. Feel free to rest your head on your hands, or you could stretch your arms forward. We're essentially taking this pause just so that our blood pressure and our circulation has some time to come back to its baseline. And then when you're ready, we'll find our way into legs up the wall, and we'll do a few yin poses here at the wall. So everyone is a little different coming into the legs at the wall. I like to sit sideways about 4 to 6 inches from the wall, and then sort of turn and pivot and extend the legs. And then you just kind of scooch closer or further so that you're just right. You get to be Goldilocks, not too close, not too far, just right. So that your entire hips, your entire buns are on the floor, but you're not so close that you feel any tension in your low back, but not so far away that you don't feel like the legs have support. So this should be comfortable. And we'll start here with the legs extended. Feel free to place your arms anywhere that you'd like, including resting on your body. It could be out to each side like wings, or maybe even a little bend at the elbow with the arms slightly overhead. Slow, deep breath. Softening the jaw and the forehead. So far in our practice, we've already done 2 different types of inversions. One with our head below our heart, and now this one with our feet above the heart. And now we'll come into butterfly pose at the wall. So bending the knees. The knees will go wide, the soles of the feet toward each other, and the pinky toe edge of the feet rests on the wall. So you can adjust any way that you need to so you feel like your legs are supported. You can even use your hands to sort of lightly support under the legs if you feel like that is something that you need. And the focus here in this pose is the inner seam of the legs, which is a pathway for multiple meridians in Chinese medicine, including kidney, which is one of the primary systems from that perspective that we want to make sure and address regularly. checking in with the expression on the face. See if there's any way to soften the expression, soften the space between the brows. And then we'll start to transition into shoelace at the wall. So starting by extending your right leg up the wall, your left knee will stay bent, and you'll cross the left leg over the right. So there's several different ways you can do this. You could have a figure four with that left leg. Some of you might find it comfortable to cross the legs completely on top with one thigh stacked on the other. And then if your thighs are stacked, like I just described, you have the additional option if you want to bend the right leg as well, so that both knees are bent. So it could be more like a figure four pigeon if you wanted, or more like the legs crossed. And the focus in either of those two variations will be the outer left hip, which correlates with liver and gallbladder. I find the wall really lovely for a yin practice because, for one thing, hopefully it supports some of the weight of your legs. For a second benefit, the legs get to be in somewhat of an elevated position, which is nice for the inversion quality. And then, kind of a third favorite thing for me is that it just shifts the poses so that we get slightly different sensation than if we did it in our normal way. We have about 5 breaths to go in our shoelace. And we'll come out in somewhat of a specific way. So we'll extend the left leg up the wall, then unwrap the right leg so it's in half butterfly. And we'll just pause here for a moment. Left leg up the wall, right leg in butterfly. And then we'll ease into shoelace with the right leg on top. So again, you could cross the right leg like a figure four. So it's a lot like a pigeon. You could cross the legs a little bit more, a little more deeply if you wanted to. And then those of you that have the legs crossed almost on top of each other, you would have the option as well then to bend the left knee. And the focus here is that right back pocket, the glute, the piriformis. This area of liver and gallbladder correlates to the wood element, which is the element that tends to get aggravated when we're stressed out. About 4 cycles of breath to go here. So this shoelace pose is a great pose to sort of prepare our hips for the work we'll do with the myofascial release in a moment. So when you're ready, we'll extend both legs up the wall for our last few breaths here. Maybe give the toes a little wiggle. And then bending the knees, and you can even sometimes set the soles of the feet on the wall. So it's like you're hugging your knees in, but the wall is doing some of the work. And then when you're ready, roll to one side, and then you're going to just pause on your side. So we don't want to make any sudden movement. We want to just pause on our side. Giving your body time to readjust. And then depending on your space and how things are set up, we'll actually come to where you probably normally practice yin, which for me will be a little bit more in the center of the room, but some of you might normally practice at the wall. So we'll come to our normal spot and we'll start off lying on our back. We'll do some poses lying on our back, but I'll have you make sure your ball is nearby because we'll use that in not too long. So now that we're getting settled in, let's pause. Okay, so knees will bend, soles of the feet wide. We'll start with a little windshield wiper. So nice and slowly, side to side. And now all of the things we're going to do with the ball for the next few minutes. You could absolutely do without the ball if you prefer. So you could either use the ball to intensify, or you can just use the floor. So it's completely up to you. The movements would be the same. Adding a ball is just one option. So we'll lift up the hips and place the ball in the center of your right glutes if you're using a ball. And then the first thing to do is just put the hips back down so your body can adjust to the foreign object that we added into the mix. And then crossing the right ankle on top of the left thigh. And then here's where it gets kind of interesting. You'll sway and rock and either use the floor to provide a little myofascial release or the ball. I tend to like to rock and move the ball with my hand every now and again. Some people like to keep the ball in the same place and lift up and then do how I'm doing now, where you're kind of rolling on top of the ball. So you can do it either way. And just like with the shoulders, you're staying in the soft tissue, so you're not using the ball directly on your sacrum or your spine. You want to stay in the meat of your hip, of your glute. And if you find any spot along your journey that feels painful, then you want to avoid that spot. You can always try it again another time. A few more breaths here. And if you do have the ball there, you'll remove the ball. We'll all meet in brief Shavasana, or you could keep the knees bent and do constructive rest. And then we'll do the left. So bending the knees. Remember, you don't have to use the ball if you don't want to. If you are using it, you'll lift up and place it at the center of the left buttock. And then let your weight come down to the floor and just acclimate for a moment. Then, when you're ready, you'll cross the left ankle on top of the right thigh. And then either using the floor or the ball, you'll rock side to side. It's like you're on a little archaeological dig or something. You're just exploring, seeing what you see, probably finding some interesting spots. For some people, this myofascial release in general, not just the hips, but any of it, can just help you feel relaxed. There can be a little bit of like a hormonal chemical response within you that creates just like some endorphins, a little sleepiness. Maybe you feel mellow. A few more breaths here. Okay, well, set the ball to the side. We're going to use it for one more thing in a moment. Uncross the legs, constructive rest with the knees bent, or Shavasana. And now we'll transition slowly to a seated position. We're going to do something that I haven't done for a while. Not only have I not taught it for a while, but I haven't done it for a while. So this will be interesting. And it's using the ball on the calf muscles. So I feel like I'm doing so much scooching. My pants are getting all tangled up somewhere. All right, so you'll come upright, and I'm sitting on a blanket. You don't have to, but I like to sit on a little something just for support. And we're going to use the ball on, like, if you think of your calf muscle is like a little bit of like a raindrop shape, a little dewdrop shape. So we're never going to use the ball right at the back of the knee nor right on the Achilles tendon. You're literally staying in the belly of the muscle. And I kind of think of it as having three different zones. So a top zone, a middle zone, and then a lower zone. And so we'll address each of those three zones. So on your right side, you'll come to the top zone of your right calf. Not at the back of the knee, you're in the muscle of the calf. Whew, yes, I can tell I haven't done this in a while. And you're just going to do your thing. So I like to go back and forth, so kind of cross fibering. You can get really creative and go other directions. In fact, the more directions, the better. So you can sort of shimmy up and down in little movements here. You can do little circles, experiment with your foot position as well. So maybe sometimes you're flexing the foot, sometimes you're pointing it, maybe you're doing ankle rolls. The idea here is that we're kind of getting rid of any stickiness. They say in our connective tissue and fascia, if it doesn't get movement and hydration, it can become sort of sticky, almost like Velcro or two terry cloth towels rubbing against each other. And instead, we want those tissues to slide and glide like silk on silk. Okay, awesome. Now do the center of your calf. So right at the center-ish. For some people, this can be the more intense spot. Really, now and again, change the direction. So not just back and forth, but a little up and down or circles if you can. So we're really working quite a bit with the superficial back line in this particular class. So the calf, the hips, the shoulders are all part of one myofascial sheath. So this will be, even though we didn't massage the feet today, this will have some benefit for the feet since everything is connected. And then now you'll do that last little third, but it's still in the belly of the calf. It's not in the Achilles. You want to stay in that soft tissue. For me today, this is proving to be maybe the most intense spot of the three, at least on this side. Okay, so when you're ready, as we've been doing, we're going to pause between sides, and I just want you to tune into have an awareness of the legs. See if there's a difference. So for me, of course, I feel a difference in my calf, but even the whole leg just feels different, probably because the circulation is a little bit different. In fact, you can even sort of point and flex your feet or do ankle rolls just to really notice the contrast. And then we'll do those same 3 zones on the left, avoiding the back of the knee, starting at the top, getting creative with the movement. Don't forget to play around with your foot and what your foot's doing. A little bit more on this top part. Then we'll shift to the center. So the center, sort of the belly, the meat of the calf. So for some people, this spot is the most intense because it's sort of the meat of the calf. For me, often it's not, just because there's more tissue there to sort of distribute it. But every day is a little different. All right, let's go to that last zone. Towards the bottom, but still within the calf. If your schedule allows, what just occurred to me would be like the perfect follow-up to this class would be a bath. Maybe even an Epsom salt bath would be really lovely. A couple of candles. I think I might do that after class. All right, so we'll go ahead and remove the ball. We're done for it for now. And just maybe even just have the legs straight for a moment so you can notice. You can move the feet a little. See if things feel a little bit more even from left to right. And then we'll cross the legs, come into a seated position. Rest your hands wherever it's comfortable. Eyes can be open or closed. And then just check in with how you're feeling after that myofascial release. And 3 main depots of stress in our body. We'll make our way back down to the floor, lying on our back. Once you're on your back, feel free to hug your knees into your chest, maybe a little sway or a rock side to side. And as you pause for a moment here with the knees hugged in, if there's any final pose or stretch that you might require before final relaxation, please feel free to find that. Otherwise, when you're ready, starting to set yourself up for your relaxation. It might be Shavasana, it might be a restorative pose, it could be an upright seated position, it could be relocating to your bed or your couch. Noticing if you need anything else in this moment to help facilitate your relaxation. It might be dimming lights or adding a layer. For the first few breaths here, have a complete awareness of the in-breath moving in and the out-breath moving out. And then gradually allow the awareness to move more internally to your internal experience, creating space for your mind-body restoration. Gently and kindly calling your awareness back into the room. Deepening your breath. Really taking your time to reawaken. If it fits within the rhythm of your day, you can stay as you are. Or if you'd like, you can begin to move a little, maybe spend some time on your side. And again, you can make a choice to stay here, or maybe find your way to an upright position. One of the best things about practicing at home is that you can stay as you are as long as you'd like. And then, whether you're still on the ground or whether you're seated upright, feel free to place your hands in a place that feels like it brings some closure and integration to your practice. Most of the time for me, that's hands at my heart. And pause to recognize your efforts in showing up today for your practice. And I thank you for your practice of yoga.